The stars had always seemed peaceful to Captain Daniel Harris. He stood on the bridge of his ship, the starward bound, watching the endless black through the main window. For 15 years, he had explored the galaxy, mapping new systems and finding new worlds for humanity to call home. He had seen wonders that most people could only dream about. But today, something felt wrong. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Laura Bennett, his communications officer. She was young, barely 30, with sharp eyes and a quick mind. "It's not like anything in our database." Daniel walked over to her station and looked at the readings. A small object was floating near the edge of the Kepler 442 system. It was sending out signals in patterns that were clearly not natural. This was not a rock or a piece of space debris. This was a machine. And it was not human. "Can you understand what it's saying?" Daniel asked. Lavra shook her head. "Not yet. But I'm working on it. The patterns are complex, but there's definitely a structure. Someone is trying to communicate." For the next 3 hours, Laura worked on breaking the code. Daniel paced the bridge, his mind racing with possibilities. Humanity had spread across a dozen star systems in the past 300 years. They had built colonies, mining stations, and research outposts. But they had never found evidence of other intelligent life. Until now. "I've got it," Laura said finally. "It's a greeting. They call themselves the Veluxi Dominion. They want to talk." Daniel felt his heart beat faster. First contact. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for since they first looked up at the night sky. He ordered Laura to respond, to tell the Veluxi that humanity came in peace and wished to learn about them. The response came quickly. Too quickly. A massive ship appeared from behind a nearby moon, as if it had been waiting for them all along. It was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. The hull was covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. Weapons ports lined every surface. A face appeared on the main screen. It belonged to a creature that looked like a giant insect, with multiple eyes and long, thin arms. "I am Ambassador Kethvorn of the Veluxi Dominion," it said. The translator made its voice sound flat and cold. "We have watched your species for many years. You have spread across space without permission. You have taken worlds that were not yours to take." Daniel kept his voice calm. "We didn't know these worlds belonged to anyone. We're happy to discuss boundaries and territories." Kethvorn made a sound that might have been laughter. "You misunderstand, human. We do not wish to discuss. The Veluxi Dominion has ruled this sector of the galaxy for 12,000 years. 7 species serve under our guidance. You will become the 8th. And if we refuse?" Daniel asked. "Then you will be removed." The screen went dark. Before Daniel could react, the Veluxi ship jumped away, disappearing into the void. He stood there for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. Then he turned to his crew. "Send a message to Earth, Priority 1. Tell them everything." 3 days later, Daniel was still waiting for a response from Earth when his sensors detected something that made his blood run cold. A fleet of Veluxi ships, hundreds of them, was moving through human space. They were not heading for his position. They were heading for New Providence. New Providence was a colony world, home to 2.3 million people. It had farms and cities and schools. Children played in its parks. Families sat down to dinner together every night. It was a peaceful place, a symbol of humanity's hope for the future. Daniel pushed his ship as fast as it could go, but he knew he would never make it in time. All he could do was watch from afar as the Veluxi fleet surrounded the planet. The attack lasted 6 hours. The Veluxi did not try to capture the colony. They did not try to negotiate or make demands. They simply destroyed everything. Their weapons burned cities to ash. Their bombs cracked the earth and boiled the seas. They killed every man, woman, and child on the planet. When it was over, New Providence was nothing but a lifeless rock floating in space. Daniel received the final transmissions from the colony. He heard mothers crying for their children. He heard soldiers making their last stand against enemies they could not hope to defeat. He heard silence as, one by one, the voices stopped. He sat in his chair and wept. On Earth, President Catherine Moore received the news in the Situation Room deep beneath the Capitol. She was surrounded by generals and admirals, scientists and diplomats. They all watched the footage from New Providence together. Nobody spoke. Nobody could find words for what they were seeing. When the last transmission ended, Catherine stood up. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but in that moment, she looked like something ancient and terrible. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time and had just been woken up. How long until they reach Earth? She asked. Admiral Gregory Cole stepped forward. He was a tall man with a face like carved stone. At their current speed, approximately 3 months. But we believe they'll attack our outer colonies first. Catherine nodded slowly. Show me our contingency plans. The Admiral hesitated. Madam President, the contingency plans are extreme. They were designed for a worst-case scenario. We never actually expected to use them. 2.3 million people are dead, Admiral. They killed our children. I want to see everything we have. Gregory led her to a secure room that very few people knew existed. Inside were files and plans that had been prepared over centuries, updated with each new technology, refined with each new discovery. They described weapons and strategies that the public had never heard of. They outlined a response to alien aggression that was designed to do one thing: make sure humanity would never be threatened again. Catherine read through the files. Her face showed no emotion. When she finished, she looked at Gregory. Wake up everything, she said. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. I want the full force of human military power ready to move within the month. The Veluxi have a 12,000-year-old empire, Gregory said carefully. 7 species serve them. Their fleet numbers in the tens of thousands. Catherine's eyes were hard as diamonds. Then, we will teach them what happens when they make humanity their enemy. We will show them that some things should never be woken up. Some enemies should never be made. She turned and walked out of the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The sleeping giant had awakened, and it was angry. Dr. Nathan Price had spent his entire life keeping secrets. For 40 years, he had worked in laboratories that did not exist, on projects that were never recorded, building weapons that humanity hoped it would never need to use. Now, standing before the United Earth Council, he finally got to tell the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was about to reveal. For the past 3 centuries, humanity has been preparing for this exact moment. We always knew that space was dangerous. We always knew that somewhere out there, something might want to destroy us. So we prepared. He pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed a map of the solar system, dotted with thousands of red markers. Hidden in asteroid belts, buried beneath the surface of moons, concealed within the atmospheres of gas giants, we have built a fleet. Not the small defense force that the public knows about. A real fleet. Over 4,000 warships, each one carrying weapons that make our public military look like toys. The council members stared at the display in shock. Some of them had served for decades and had never heard even a whisper of this. Nathan let them absorb the information before continuing. The Veluxi watched us for years before making contact. They studied our colonies, our trade routes, our visible military forces. They calculated that we were weak, that we would be easy to conquer. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They never imagined that we might be hiding our true strength. They never considered that humans might be smarter than they looked. President Catherine Moore stood up. "How soon can this fleet be ready?" 72 hours for the first wave, Nathan replied. "Full mobilization within 2 weeks." "Do it." The order went out across human space, transmitted on channels that officially did not exist. On a frozen moon orbiting Jupiter, massive doors that had been sealed for a century began to open. Ships that had never tasted vacuum powered up their engines for the first time. Crews who had trained in secret for their entire careers finally received the call they had been waiting for. Admiral Gregory Cole stood on the bridge of the Hammer of Dawn, the flagship of the First Strike Fleet. He watched through the view screen as ship after ship emerged from hidden bases. Destroyers and cruisers, carriers and battleships, each one a masterpiece of human engineering. Each one designed for a single purpose: to win wars. His flag captain, Commander Samantha Ellis, approached with a tablet in her hands. She was a practical woman, efficient and calm. Exactly the kind of officer Gregory needed in times like this. "Admiral, we've received intelligence reports on the Veluxy from Director Walsh. I think you should see this." Gregory took the tablet and began to read. Kevin Walsh was the head of Human Intelligence Services, a man who dealt in secrets and shadows. His report painted a detailed picture of the Veluxy Dominion. 7 species served under Veluxy rule. 12 core worlds formed the heart of their empire, with 300 colony systems spread across the sector. Their fleet was vast, numbering in the tens of thousands. On paper, they were an unstoppable force, but Kevin had found their weakness. "They haven't fought a real war in 2,000 years, Gregory read aloud. "Their military is designed for suppression and control, not for combat against an equal enemy. They've grown comfortable. They've forgotten what it means to face someone who fights back." Samantha nodded. "They're bullies, sir. They're used to picking on people who can't defend themselves. They've never met anyone like us." Gregory set down the tablet. "Then let's remind the galaxy why humanity should never be underestimated." Across human space, the mobilization continued. Factories that had been producing consumer goods switched overnight to manufacturing weapons and ammunition. Universities sent their brightest students to serve as technicians and engineers. Hospitals prepared for the wounded that everyone knew would come, but it was not just soldiers and scientists who answered the call. Ordinary people, farmers and teachers and shopkeepers, volunteered by the millions. They remembered New Providence. They had watched the footage, heard the screams, seen the flames, and they wanted revenge. Captain Daniel Harris received his new orders aboard a space station orbiting Mars. He was given command of the Retribution, the newest and most powerful vessel in the human fleet. It was a ship built for one purpose: to hunt down the enemies of humanity and destroy them. "Your mission is simple," Admiral Cole told him through a holographic transmission. "Find the Veluxy homeworld. Make them regret the day they touched New Providence." Daniel looked at his new ship through the station window. It was beautiful in a terrible way, all sharp angles and hidden weapons. A predator dressed in metal and fire. "Understood, Admiral," he said. "They killed 2.3 million of our people. I intend to make sure they never kill another." The fleet gathered at the edge of human space, the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. 4,000 ships hung in the darkness, their running lights twinkling like angry stars. Inside each vessel, crews performed final checks and said quiet prayers. President Moore addressed them all through a system-wide broadcast. Her face appeared on every screen, in every ship, on every station. 3 weeks ago, the Veluxy Dominion murdered 2.3 million innocent people. Men, women, and children who had done nothing wrong. They killed them not because of anything humanity had done, but simply because they could. Because they believed we were weak. Because they thought we would not fight back. Her voice grew harder, sharper. They were wrong. We are not weak. We do not surrender. We do not forget. And we do not forgive. She paused, letting her words sink in. Today, we go to war. Not for conquest or glory, but for justice. For the memory of everyone we lost. For the future of everyone who remains. The Veluxi wanted to teach humanity a lesson about power. We're going to teach them a lesson instead. We're going to show them what happens when you make an enemy of Earth. On 4,000 bridges, officers gave the order to move. Engines roared to life. Ships jumped into faster-than-light travel, vanishing from human space and appearing in Veluxi territory, like ghosts made of steel and fury. The war had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Commander Samantha Ellis had studied war her entire life. She had read about every battle in human history, from ancient cavalry charges to the first conflicts in space. She thought she understood what combat looked like, but nothing had prepared her for what she saw at Nexus Prime. The Veluxi shipyards hung in orbit around a brown dwarf star, massive structures of metal and glass where enemy warships were born. Intelligence said there were over 200 vessels docked there, with thousands more under construction. It was one of the most heavily defended positions in the Dominion. Samantha's strike force consisted of 50 ships. She was outnumbered 4-1. The battle lasted 4 minutes. Human weapons were not, just more advanced than Veluxi technology. They were generations ahead. Missiles that could think for themselves, changing course to avoid defenses and find weak points. Energy beams that cut through shields like paper. Fighters that moved so fast the enemy targeting systems could not track them. The Veluxi never even managed to fire their weapons. Their ships exploded one after another, filling the void with fire and debris. Their shipyards broke apart, spilling half-built vessels into the cold of space. Their crews died without understanding what had hit them. When it was over, Samantha looked at the destruction and felt nothing. No joy. No satisfaction, not even relief. Only a cold determination to keep going. Send a message to Admiral Cole, she said. Nexus Prime has fallen. Moving to secondary targets. Across the Dominion, similar scenes were playing out. Human fleets appeared without warning, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The Veluxi commanders sent desperate reports to their high command, begging for guidance, for support, for anything that might help them understand what was happening. The high command had no answers. They sat in their chambers on Veluxi Prime, staring at maps that showed their empire crumbling piece by piece. In 12,000 years, they had never faced an enemy like this. They had forgotten that such enemies could exist. On the colony world of Vareth 7, the war took on a different face. This was not a naval battle fought in the emptiness between stars. This was ground combat, brutal and personal, fought in the streets and buildings of an alien city. Marine Sergeant Tony Martinez led his platoon through the ruins of what had once been a commercial district. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to see more than a few meters ahead. Strange sounds echoed from the broken buildings. The cries of wounded Veluxi and the crackle of fires that burned without end. "Sergeant, we found it," said Private Lisa Chun, pointing toward a large structure at the end of the street. "The detention facility. That's where they're keeping our people." Tony looked at the building. It was surrounded by walls topped with energy barriers, guarded by towers equipped with automated weapons. Getting in would not be easy. But easy had stopped mattering when New Providence burned. "Everyone on me," he ordered. "We're getting our people out of there." The assault was quick and violent. Tony's platoon breached the walls with explosive charges, poured through the gaps before the dust had settled, and killed every guard they encountered. The Veluxi were not prepared for this kind of attack. They expected enemies to surrender or flee. They did not expect enemies who charged forward without hesitation, who kept fighting even when wounded, who seemed to have no fear of death. Inside the facility, Tony found what he was looking for. Rows of cells, each one containing human prisoners taken during Veluxi raids on outer colonies. Men and women who had been farmers and miners, teachers and engineers. People who had done nothing wrong except exist in a galaxy where the Veluxi considered themselves masters. But when Tony opened the cells, he discovered something that made his stomach turn. Not all the prisoners were whole. Some were missing limbs. Some had strange scars that suggested surgery. Some stared at nothing, their minds broken by things Tony did not want to imagine. "What did they do to you?" he whispered. A woman with gray hair and empty eyes looked at him. "Experiments," she said, her voice flat and dead. "They wanted to understand how we work. So they took us apart, piece by piece." Tony felt rage build inside him, hot and dark. He had seen terrible things in his years as a soldier. He had killed enemies and lost friends. But this was different. This was cruelty for its own sake, the casual torture of beings that the Veluxi considered less than animals. He sent his report to Admiral Cole. Every word, every detail, every horror he had witnessed. And he waited for a response. It came within the hour. "Sergeant Martinez, your report has been received and shared with the President. Rules of engagement have been updated. Any facility involved in the imprisonment or experimentation on human beings is now a priority military target. Show no mercy. Give them what they deserve." Tony looked at his platoon. They had all read the message. They all understood what it meant. "You heard the Admiral," he said. "Let's get to work." Meanwhile, Captain Daniel Harris and the Retribution were cutting a path through the heart of Veluxi territory. 3 systems fell in a single week, their defenses shattered by weapons they could not counter. Their populations forced to watch as human soldiers raised Earth's flag over their capitals. At each world, Daniel broadcast the same message. His face appeared on every screen. His voice echoed in every home. "You killed 2.3 million of our people. We remember every name. We remember every face. We remember every child who will never grow up. Every parent who will never see their family again. Every dream that ended in fire. You thought we were weak. You thought we would accept your rule. You were wrong." Ambassador Kethvaran, the same Veluxi diplomat who had delivered the ultimatum to humanity, tried desperately to open negotiations. He sent messages begging for peace, offering concessions, promising reforms. His communications went unanswered. Humanity had nothing to say. The other species in the Dominion began to realize that they had backed the wrong side. The Thrall Collective, longtime allies of the Veluxi, withdrew their forces from joint operations and retreated to their home systems. The Makari Federation sent secret envoys to Earth, offering intelligence on Veluxi positions in exchange for immunity. One by one, the pillars that had supported the Dominion for 12,000 years began to crumble. Admiral Cole watched the war unfold from his command center, surrounded by displays showing the positions of every fleet, the status of every battle, the progress of every objective. They were winning. More than winning. They were destroying an empire that had seemed invincible just weeks ago. But Cole knew that the hardest part was still ahead. The Veluxi would not surrender easily. Somewhere in their territory, they were gathering their remaining forces for a final stand. And when that battle came, it would decide the fate of both species. "Find their homeworld," he ordered his intelligence officers. "Find it and prepare our forces for the final assault." The hunt was on. Veluxi Prime was beautiful in a strange and alien way. The planet hung in space like a jewel, its surface covered in forests of purple vegetation and oceans of deep green water. Cities of crystal and metal rose toward the sky. monuments to a civilization that had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Admiral Gregory Cole looked at it through the viewscreen of the Hammer of Dawn and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. This was the heart of the Dominion, the seat of the government that had ordered the destruction of New Providence. And today, it would fall. 800 human warships surrounded the planet, forming a ring of steel and fire that blocked out the stars. The Veluxy defense fleet, once the pride of their empire, was scattered and broken. Some ships tried to fight, but they were destroyed within minutes. Others tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Most simply drifted in space, their crews abandoning them in escape pods that were captured by human vessels. "Admiral," said Commander Samantha Ellis, "the orbital defenses are targeting us. Should we engage?" Gregory shook his head. "No, let them fire. Let them see how useless their weapons are." The Veluxy platforms launched everything they had: missiles and energy beams, torpedoes and kinetic projectiles. A wave of destruction that would have shattered any fleet in the galaxy dot the human shields held without strain. Not a single ship was damaged. Not a single crew member was injured. "Now," said Gregory, "show them what human weapons can do." The counterattack was precise and devastating. Orbital platforms exploded like fireworks. Ground installations vanished under streams of fire that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Military bases, weapons factories, communication centers, all of them reduced to rubble in less than an hour. But Gregory did not order the planet destroyed. That would have been too quick, too easy. The Veluxy deserved worse than a clean death. He opened a channel to Dr. Nathan Price, who was waiting aboard a specialized vessel filled with equipment that had never been used before. "Doctor, begin the Achilles Protocol." Nathan nodded and turned to his team. They had practiced this moment 1,000 times in simulations. Now, they would do it for real. The Achilles Protocol was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It did not kill directly. Instead, it targeted something more fundamental: technology itself. Specialized pulses, tuned to the exact frequencies of Veluxy electronics, spread across the planet like invisible waves. Wherever they touched, machines died. Power grids failed, plunging cities into darkness. Communication networks collapsed, cutting off every Veluxy from every other. Vehicles stopped working, stranding millions. Factories went silent. Hospitals lost their equipment. Climate control systems that kept the planet's temperature stable shut down. In a civilization that depended on technology for everything. The Achilles Protocol was a death sentence delivered slowly and painfully. Captain Daniel Harris landed on the surface with a ground force of 10,000 Marines. Their shuttles descended through atmosphere that was already growing colder, touching down on the outskirts of the capital city. Around them, the great towers that had stood for millennia were dark and silent, monuments to a power that no longer existed. "Move out," Daniel ordered. "Our objective is the Hall of Sovereigns. We take their leaders alive." The march through the city was strange and haunting. There were no defenders, no resistance. The Veluxy had never imagined that enemies might walk their sacred streets, so they had never prepared for such an event. Civilians watched from windows with wide eyes, too shocked to run, too terrified to fight. Lieutenant Amy Douglas led the breach team that entered the Hall of Sovereigns. It was a massive building, carved from a single piece of crystal that seemed to glow with inner light. Inside, murals covered every wall, depicting 12 millennia of Veluxy conquest and domination. Scenes of planets burning, species kneeling in submission, enemies dying in countless ways. They were proud of this, Amy said, looking at the images. They thought this made them great. "It made them monsters," said Tony Martinez, who had joined the assault force after his work on Vera 7, and monsters need to be put down. They found the Veluxi leaders in the deepest chamber, huddled together like frightened animals. The sovereigns who had ruled an empire, who had commanded fleets and armies, who had decided the fates of billions, were reduced to shivering creatures hiding from the darkness. Ambassador Kethvorin was among them, his multiple eyes wide with terror. "Please," he said, his voice translated through Daniel's equipment. "We surrender. We will give you anything you want. Peace, territory, resources. Just spare us, please." Daniel looked at him without expression. "You didn't spare New Providence. You didn't spare the prisoners in your detention facilities. You didn't spare anyone." "We didn't know," Kethvorin stammered. "We didn't understand. We thought you were just another primitive species. We didn't know you were capable of this." "No," Daniel agreed. "You didn't. That was your mistake." A holographic display activated in the center of the chamber, showing President Catherine Moore's face. She looked at the cowering Veluxi leaders, her expression cold and hard. "For 12,000 years, you ruled this sector of the galaxy," she said. "You conquered species and destroyed worlds. You believed you were the masters of everything. You believed no one could challenge you." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "3 months ago, you murdered 2.3 million of my people. Men, women, and children who had never harmed you, who had never threatened you, who only wanted to live in peace. You killed them because you could. Because you believed we were weak. Because you believed we would submit." Her voice grew colder, sharper. "You believed we were beneath you. You believed we would break. You were wrong. Your empire is ended. Your worlds are ours. And every species in this galaxy will remember what happens to those who harm humanity." The Veluxi surrendered unconditionally. Their remaining fleet was dismantled, every ship broken down for scrap. Their colonies were placed under human administration, governed by officers who had no patience for resistance. Their technology was confiscated, studied, and either adapted for human use or destroyed. The dominion that had ruled for 12,000 years ceased to exist in less than 3 months. Daniel stood on the steps of the Hall of Sovereigns, looking out at a city that was slowly dying without its technology. The temperature was dropping, the air growing thin. Soon, the Veluxi would have to choose between accepting human help or freezing in the darkness they had created for themselves. "Is this justice?" Amy asked, standing beside him. Daniel thought about New Providence. He thought about the screams he had heard in those final transmissions, the mothers calling for their children, the soldiers fighting to their last breath. He thought about the prisoners on Varath 7, broken and tortured for experiments that served no purpose except cruelty. "I don't know if it's justice," he said, "but it's what they deserve. And it's what humanity needed to do. We had to show the galaxy that we are not victims. We had to show them that hurting us has consequences. Otherwise, someone else would try the same thing tomorrow." He looked up at the stars, visible now that the city lights had failed. "Let them remember this. Let everyone remember this. And let them think twice before threatening Earth again." The war was over. Humanity had won, but the consequences of that victory would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. The silence began 3 weeks after the fall of Veluxi Prime. At first, nobody noticed. There were too many other things to worry about: rebuilding, reorganizing, managing the former Dominion territories. But Ambassador Patricia Lang noticed. It was her job to notice. "Something is wrong," she said to Admiral Gregory Cole during their weekly briefing. "The Makari stopped responding to our communications 5 days ago. The Thrall Collective has recalled all their diplomats from neutral space. And there are reports of at least a dozen other species pulling back their observation posts from the edges of human territory." Gregory frowned. Maybe they're afraid we'll attack them next. Maybe, Patricia agreed. But I need to find out for sure. If there's going to be another war, I want to know about it before it starts. She took a small ship to neutral space, a region claimed by no species, where diplomatic meetings could take place without fear of ambush. There, she sent out a message on all frequencies, asking for anyone willing to talk to meet with her. 3 days passed. Then a single vessel appeared, small and unarmed. It carried Council Vithan, an elderly Thrall diplomat whom Patricia had met several times before the war. He was a cautious creature, with scales of deep blue and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. They met in a neutral station, a structure that had been built by a species long extinct, maintained by automated systems that cared nothing for politics or war. "Thank you for coming," Patricia said. "I need to understand what's happening. Why has the galaxy gone quiet?" Vithan studied her for a long moment before answering. "You really don't know, do you? You don't understand what you've done. We defended ourselves. The Veluxi attacked us without provocation. They killed millions of our people. We responded." "Yes," Vithan said, his voice soft and tired. "You responded. And in doing so, you changed everything." He moved to a window that looked out at the stars. The Veluxi ruled for 12,000 years. In that time, empires rose and fell. Species evolved and went extinct. Wars were fought, some lasting centuries. But through it all, the Veluxi endured. They were the constant, the power that could not be challenged. Every species in this galaxy grew up knowing that the Veluxi were eternal, unbeatable, permanent. He turned to face Patricia. "And then you came. A young species, barely 3 centuries old in space. Primitives, the Veluxi called you. Easily conquered. Easily controlled." His eyes met hers. "In 3 months, you destroyed what 12,000 years could not. You didn't just defeat them. You erased them. Their empire, their power, their very identity as rulers of the galaxy. Gone. In less time than it takes for a Thrall egg to hatch." Patricia felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you saying the other species are afraid we'll do the same to them?" Vithan made a sound that might have been laughter, but it held no humor. "Afraid? Ambassador, we are terrified. Not just of what you might do, but of what we now know you are capable of. You hid your true strength for 3 centuries. You watched. You waited. You let the galaxy believe you were weak while you built weapons that could destroy empires." He stepped closer to her. "Every species in this galaxy is now asking the same question. If you did that to the Veluxi, what would you do to us? What are you hiding now? What other weapons do you have that we don't know about?" Patricia wanted to argue, to explain that humanity only wanted peace, that they had only fought because they had no choice. But she saw the fear in Vithan's eyes and knew that words would not be enough. Actions spoke louder, and humanity's actions had spoken very loudly indeed. "We're not going to attack anyone else," she said. "The war is over. We have no intention of conquering the galaxy." "Perhaps you don't," Vithan replied. "But how can we be sure? 3 months ago, the Veluxi were sure you were harmless. Now they don't exist anymore. Trust, Ambassador, is a fragile thing. And humanity has shown the galaxy that it cannot be trusted to remain weak." When Patricia returned to Earth, she brought a report that made the Council fall silent. Every species in the known galaxy was pulling back from human space. Trade routes that had buzzed with activity for centuries were empty. Diplomatic channels that had always been open were now closed. The stars themselves seemed to be holding their breath. Admiral Cole reviewed the intelligence reports with growing concern. Military activity across known space has dropped by 90%. Every species is reinforcing their home systems and withdrawing from border territories. They're all preparing for something. They're preparing for us, said Daniel Harris, who had been promoted to Rear Admiral after the war. They think we're coming for them next, are we? Asked President Moore. The room fell silent. Everyone knew the answer, but nobody wanted to say it. No, Daniel said finally. We're not. But they don't know that. And after what we did to the Veluxy, they have no reason to believe anything we say. Moore stood and walked to the window of the council chamber. Outside, the city stretched toward the horizon, filled with people living their lives, unaware of the weight that rested on their leaders' shoulders. We sought only to defend ourselves, she said quietly. We wanted justice for our people, for New Providence, for the 2.3 million who died. She paused. But our defense has become a warning. Our justice has become a threat. The galaxy is silent because it fears us. She turned to face the council. Perhaps that is not a bad thing. Perhaps a galaxy that fears humanity is a galaxy that will never threaten us again. Perhaps this silence is the price of safety. Daniel thought about the Veluxy, about their arrogance and their cruelty, about the way they had looked down on humanity as nothing more than insects to be crushed. He thought about New Providence, about the transmissions that still haunted his dreams, about the names and faces of 2.3 million people who would never come home. Let them fear, he said. Let them remember. Let them understand that Earth's children will never be victims again. In the years that followed, no alien species initiated contact with humanity. Probes sent to human space were always unarmed, always transmitting peaceful intentions, always careful never to give offense. Trade was conducted through intermediaries who never entered human territory. Diplomatic messages were polite to the point of nervousness. The stars remained quiet. And in that silence, humanity continued to grow, to expand, to build. New colonies rose on distant worlds. New ships patrolled the borders. New generations grew up knowing that they were part of something powerful, something feared, something that would never bow to anyone. But they also grew up with stories of New Providence, of 2.3 million innocent people who had died for no reason except alien cruelty. They visited memorials and learned names and made promises to the dead. We remember, they said. We will always remember. And in the silence of the galaxy, everyone else remembered too. They remembered what happened when humanity was pushed. They remembered the Veluxy, who had ruled for 12,000 years and vanished in 3 months. They remembered the ships that appeared from nowhere, the weapons that could not be stopped, the anger that burned hotter than any star. Some said humanity was a monster, a threat to all civilized species. Others said they were simply survivors, doing what they had to do to protect their own. A few, speaking in whispers, said they were something new, something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that refused to die, that refused to submit, that refused to be anything less than free, whatever they were. One thing was certain, the galaxy would never forget them, and that was exactly what humanity wanted. The stars went quiet, and humanity stood among them, watching, waiting, remembering, always remembering.